Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Writing Life. I'm Stephen W. Long. And I was thinking about my guest today is a little bit of a caution, maybe, that you have to be careful wherever you go. You might run into an author, and darn it, they look like everybody else. So you have to watch yourself. John Trudel is my guest. And John, we did meet in the parking lot of the Habitat Restore.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I don't remember how we got so quickly onto books, but we did, didn't we?
You saved my life. You had a forklift, and we started talking about books. It was
Okay.
wonderful. Yeah.
Well, that's the
And I don't know how we got onto books.
natural segue from forklifts to
forklifts
books.
to books. It was
Yeah.
a desk,
Okay, that's right. So a couple of things, and obviously this is about writing. We're going to get to that, but you're kind of an interesting guy. Apart from that, you are an instrument-rated pilot.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you: is that an avocation? Were you a commercial pilot, or?
Very, almost is the answer.
Okay.
It turned out I was very interested in technology and aircraft, built model airplanes and everything. And back in the day, I hung around a little airport, and I would wash airplanes, do odd jobs all week, and I get an hour of flying time. So
Okay.
I had a pilot's license before I had a driver's license.
Oh my gosh.
And but yeah, I'm going to be a pilot, right? Well, it turned out, I wound up going to college and so forth and so on. Had to wear glasses, so I was going to be a fighter pilot. Okay. Well, they didn't want people with glasses back then,
Right.
and so that didn't qualify. I was an Air Force ROTC, and I went, if I'm not going to be a pilot, I don't want to do this.
Right.
And so I wound up staying in engineering, and but it got me back to airplanes. I was the idiot civilian in the back of these highly classified airplanes, trying to make experimental equipment work.
Okay.
And so that was that career. But I had a pilot's license before I had a driver's license. I upgraded from time to time. Never did get by commercial. I never was particularly interested in driving airplanes for a living. And in fact, it turned out better that way. But I had a consulting business for many years. I was a single practitioner consultant with big client, Intel, Hewlett Packard, IBM. And you would go to these companies and have not a clue as to how long I helped them with product planning and strategy. And you didn't have any idea how long you would be there. They had problems and they wanted to discuss them. And you can't look at your watch, I got to catch a plane.
Right.
And so I kind of commuted around in a small airplane, at least the West Coast, and sometimes even as far back as the East Coast, international, of course, no. But that was, upgraded the airplane, had the consulting business for years, and I thought I would have to give it up when I retired, and now I write novels. Well, it turns out, much to my delight, if you write novels, more or less the big publishers run the big cities. If you go, Putnam or whoever, they'll subsidize the placement in the bookstores and the events, wine, cheese, that sort of thing. But if you go to a small town, they are so happy to have an author, and you can go to all these really neat, we have an author here, and they'll have some sort of an event.
Sure.
And late summer, I did all the air shows on the West Coast, just about Madras and Hood River, and of course the Oregon Air Show. I love airplanes, so there I am signing books.
Okay.
So that's kind of my background and my advocation. I never have done it for a living, and I highly respect the people who had. It's a different class when you're having to do it on a schedule. I can always put it on the ground when I feel like it.
And my recollection is that when we got together, you had said the item that you were donating was stored in your hangar.
Yes.
And so, do you have a plane, or?
Yes, we have a plane. We've had this particular plane. We got it as a wedding present to ourselves. I had a smaller one, and met my wife at her late husband's funeral, which, if we have that coffee cup, God's house.
Oh yeah, you bet.
Okay, well, a very distorted, and this is I'm gifting this. This was my first novel, the one that started it all. And I actually met my wife at her late husband's funeral. And this is sort of a dramatic version of that. She claims highly distorted. But
That's a wife.
yeah, but that's how it all started. And when we got married, I had been, like I said, commuting around a lot in a small plane and over the mountains at night, single engine. And we need some, and she wanted to carry things. So we wound up getting a twin. So here this woman is saying, we need a bigger airplane. How often does that happen?
Yeah.
And we bought a twin Comanche, and that's what I fly and still do. And I can go to book signings, and things have changed. We have a house now down in Arizona as well as here.
Okay.
And you can actually, most of the time, get down there faster in a small plane than you can on the airlines by the time you go through the security.
Right. Well, good. So we did that part. I also read that you're in high tech, or you were, and that was your career.
Yes.
And you're an inventor. And I wondered, was invention part of high tech, or are there two? Did you invent in your basement at night, or how was this related?
That's interesting. And all of my technical career was new things. That's what I did. So I was always working on, the early stuff was military, later it was commercial, but it was always something that was trying to come into being. So all around me, people were inventing things. As I got more into that, I was doing the systems analysis for how the overall thing worked. Much earlier, I designed hardware and stuff. Then it went to software, and for a long time, you couldn't get patents for software. And but everything I was involved in was something new, something evolutionary, and something that was protected as intellectual property. That's where I lived. That was my whole career for decades. And but I had never had a patent myself, because back then you didn't patent systems and you couldn't patent software, which you laugh today. That can't be true.
Right.
Microsoft and all.
Sure.
But back then you couldn't do that. So my last real job, I was the first, last, and only manager of the business manager of the research labs at Tektronix, the old Tektronix.
Oh, okay.
And we had 4 labs, and we did new things that didn't really fit in the product divisions. And my job was, we're doing all this stuff. How can you make money off it? How can you turn it into a product? And we would go around and do research and interview customers and talk, and the engineers always had ideas. And so we have this whole stream of things that we're inventing. And some of them, well, why don't we try this? And so one of the engineers says, John, you need to get your name on the patent. And at that time, I had a marketing title. It was to figure out what to do, not how to do it.
Right.
So I said, well, why not? And we got a patent on it. It turned out to be an interesting patent, worth something. But they were shocked. Marketing people aren't supposed to have patents. Well, that's just how it is.
Right.
And in fact, after I left tech, I left to start my own consulting business, and tech was starting to downsize. They'd fallen onto hard times. Great company. And I said, well, I'd rather be doing the new things rather than be trying to prop up the old ones. And so I'm leaving, and I gave my little speech. I said, it's been, I guess at the time I'd been there for 16 years and enjoyed it and everything else. Time to do something else. And so I take my badge, give my little speech, push it across the table, and the fellow I'm presenting it to doesn't say anything, and I finish my speech, and I say thank you, and pushes the badge back. Puzzled. That's odd. So we went through several versions of that, and he says, well, John, you can leave if you want to, but we're in patent litigation with a number of Japanese companies who have infringed our patents. And it turns out of the majority of them that were infringed were in product lines that I had. And so they said, you can leave, but we'll just subpoena you and you'll have to come back. Wouldn't you rather be on salary?
Yeah.
So I stayed for most of another year. Okay, can I go now? Okay, and I did.
Yeah.
And that was to start my consulting business, which I did for a while.
Yeah.
And then I eventually retired from that, and now I write novels. My theme is everything has some technology in it. It's always set a few years in the future.
Right.
And the amazing thing is I make up these stories and they keep coming true.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if this is a tagline, if it, you did it for one book, but I hope I quote this correctly. It's fiction until it comes true.
Thrillers are fiction
go.
it happens. That
Yeah.
is actually on my website.
Yeah.
And so far that has happened. I have 6 novels out.
Time and again, huh?
Every time. And sometimes you don't even realize it. Like if you take God's House, it was really about corruption in large organizations. You would call it the deep state or something
Okay.
like that now. This was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But things not being as they seem. They seem to be one thing and under the surface or something else. That was what God's House was about. The second novel was called Privacy Wars. It was, the second one that came out. I actually had started Privacy Wars earlier, but it was the second one out. It won the most awards. It won the highest awards and the most. And it was kind of Big Brother on steroids, the idea that with cyber technology, the government could watch everything you do, and that would be kind of scary. And the book comes out, and at the time, nobody talked about that much. The people doing network security, either it was proprietary and very confidential, or else it was government and very classified. Book comes out, and that was when Snowden was running for his life and stuck in the Moscow airport. And everybody wants to know about it. Is everybody really being watched? And you go, well, yeah. And at the time, I was just writing novels. So yeah, I can do interviews about that. So I did lots of interviews. The people actually doing the work, of course, couldn't talk about it. So Privacy Wars turned real with a vengeance. The next was Soft Target. It was about bioweapons. And we kind of have bioweapons. Now, they were different than what was in the book, but they're walking bioweapons. All the old diseases are back, and we've stopped quarantining people, so that's a problem. And then I did the Ravens books.
Yeah.
That's my current series, Ravens Run. And I did this for 2 reasons. The thing I was interested in was some technology stuff, but I had an uncle that I had never met. He married to my mother's sister, my Aunt Ruth, who was my favorite aunt when I was growing up. His name was George Noville. And when I was in college, they got married, and my mother was the maid of honor that they got married down in Mexico. And everybody in the family is saying, oh, you like airplanes. You like, you got to meet George Noville. He did something in aviation. Really? Okay. I didn't know. I was off at school trying to be a student. And Ruth and he were married for 6 months. He was killed in an accident
Oh my gosh.
in Mexico. And she never really recovered from it. But after she died and after my mother died, I inherited this big box of records. Oh, and somewhere along the line, I see an aviation magazine, and in it they have Lindbergh's helmet, okay? Not the original helmet. They never found that. When he landed in Paris, he was mobbed by a crowd, damaged his airplane. Somebody stole his helmet. And the French, as always, were mortified. They fixed the airplane, new helmet, and 7 aviation luminaries of the day signed the helmet. Amelia Earhart, Orville Wright, Jimmy Doolittle, a couple of others, George Noville, my uncle.
Really?
Wow, who is George Noville? And I have this big box of records, and I'm going through it, and I'm writing this book. And I'm going through, well, who is George Noble? It turns out, I finally figured it out. He was Admiral Byrd's second in command on all of those expeditions, you know, to the South Pole,
Right.
polar flights. They flew the Atlantic. I got some of the actual pictures from the family archives, which I finally donated to the museum over in Hood River. But I wound that into this novel as backstory.
Mm-hmm.
But the key theme of the novel was one of these what ifs. And what if you had terrorists with Iranian nuclear weapons? Wouldn't that be pretty scary? And yeah, that'd be real scary. At the time, I thought it was very implausible, but I
Right.
thought that's a great storyline.
Would
So
you
I took
stop this, please?
I gotta stop, yeah. I know, I gotta stop. But anyway, so I made that one up. And of course, by the time that book came out, they were
Yeah.
talking about the Iran deal.
Sure.
And for the second time in world history, we had a major head of state come to America to warn us about something. In World War II, it was Churchill and Hitler. Back then, it was Netanyahu and Iran. But that was my story. I did a lot of interviews on that. And right now, I'm going to donate this book to you.
Oh,
And I'm going to tell you about my special pen.
okay.
There was a fellow from Oregon, pretty well known in aviation, Norm Jones. He used to sell airplanes and been around forever. And he was a good friend of mine. He was the kind of guy you could buy an airplane on a handshake.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
a complicated deal on him. Okay. And when Norm retired, he had a little shop and he would make pens.
Really?
Yeah. And of course, he made this one. Well, he never sold them. He'd only give them to his friends. So he had given me a pen. And okay, fine. Years pass. I get into novels, and it takes a while to get them done, and then they start being published. And Norm calls me, and they're doing pretty well. And Norm calls, and he said, "How the book's doing?" "Oh, good." He said, "Well, I want to give you something." Well, he was in Oregon, I was in Arizona. Well, when I get back, so we go back and we go to have breakfast, and he hands me this pen. And I look at it, and I look at him, and he already gave me a pen. He said, "This one is special." I said, "Really?" And it comes with a story, and here's the story. Norm is a young Marine. He's 20 years old. He's face down in the sand on Saipan. And the whole Marine Division is stuck there. They can't go forward, they can't go back. The Japanese have the beach zeroed in, shells are coming down, and not looking good for them. That's even in the history books. There was a Marine Division trapped on the beach for a while. The USS Missouri was brand new on its first deployment. The most modern battleship in the world at the time, radar-controlled guns, stands offshore, banging away with the 16-inchers. These shells are going right over Norm's head. And he said, you know, you could see them go over. They made this whistling noise. The whole ground is shaking. Goes on for a while. The enemy batteries are silenced. Missouri sails away. Later that year, the surrender ceremony is made on the deck of the Missouri. Norm got a fragment of the original deck.
Oh my gosh.
It'll bring you luck. It's the original.
Oh, you give me chills.
Yeah, he made the pens out of a shell casing. But I only use that pen for book signings. And I'm going to give you this book, the first of the Raven series. And I will sign it for you with my lucky pen.
Yeah.
And you may do with it as you wish. And thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you, sir. And Caroline, if we can get it, let's show the pen, because I don't know that people could see. The clip is a rifle.
Yeah, it's a 308 cartridge.
And that's actually a real cartridge.
You know, I don't know. Norm used to buy these kits, and he would assemble the pens, and he would get pieces of wood and turn this part of it. So he bought these things. I don't know how he built them.
Okay.
But if you look at the back of it, it has some etching on it. This is a 308 Magnum shell casing. So some company sold this kit,
Okay.
and then you could take your lathe and make a part of it. And unfortunately, I have a lot of questions. Norm died a couple years ago, and I can't get any answers.
Now, and is this material actually part of the deck?
Yes, and that's a funny story too. It was part of the original deck of the USS Missouri. And how do you get a hold of that? Okay. Well, it turned out when Norm died, again, we were out of the state, but we came back and they had a memorial service for him. And of course, I told the story about the pen and held the pen up. And I don't know if you know Betsy Johnson or not.
I don't.
She used to be she's a very senior senator in Salem, and for a while she ran the aviation division years ago. So I've always, Norm flying, me flying, Betsy flying. When she was a young girl, she was apparently a pretty good helicopter pilot. Anyway, so now she's in the Senate, and she was a good friend of Norm's, and we have this, and I give my little speech, and so then you go off and you have coffee, and there's this whole room full of people. And Betsy's a very brassy kind of woman, loud voice, back of the room. You ratted Norm out on a felony. You can't go carve up a warship, you know. And what had happened when the Missouri was being moved, it had been in storage somewhere. They were moving it to Pearl Harbor. It's on display there. But they fixed it up here. They towed it to Astoria, and it was there for a while. And then it was up in Bremerton being refurbished to take it over and, to Hawaii. And the deck had been vandalized. And so somebody carved it up with a penknife, terrible thing, or whatever. So Norm got a fragment of the original deck. I think he had a family member or a good friend at the shipyard. And how big a fragment, I don't know. But he made my pen out of it. And that's how that came to be.
Well, I would say he didn't deface it, he preserved it.
Right. He didn't, yeah, they were going to throw the wood away. They had replaced it. It's the old teak off the original deck.
Yeah.
And so nothing got defaced, and in fact, that's perfect. He didn't disassemble a warship; it was scrap.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. But I don't want to run out of time before we talk about writing.
Okay.
So one of the questions that I had for you, you came to this later in life. A couple of things. Did you have writing experience? And when you do a novel, how do you approach it? It sounds to me like you approach it plot first and character later, but talk a little bit about that.
Yes. Very interesting, because when I went to school and, I got my learning, as they say, I was interested in technology. But I had one professor who was from New Jersey, and that's where I was at Georgia Tech. And so, oh my God, this guy from New Jersey, he liked me. He was an English teacher, so he insisted I do all this English stuff that I thought I would never use, okay? And I got my degrees, I worked in technology, but you always have to write reports and things.
Right.
And you have to write proposals, and so, okay, you have to write. And even more so when you leave the big companies. If you are a little single shingle consultant, you can't call up IBM and say, give me a bunch of money and I'll help you, They have to come to you. So what I would do is I would give seminars and I would write things. And I wrote 2 nonfiction books and hundreds of columns for magazines, Electronic Design, and some of the IEEE Institute of Electrical Engineers books. So I'd written a lot of stuff, and I thought I was a pretty good writer. So I retire, write a novel. How hard can everybody? You need to write a novel. These interesting stories. Took me 10 years.
That's typical for a first novel, actually.
Okay, well. Now, what I did, and I get asked particularly by writers, what is your strategy for writing novels? I found a very different from nonfiction books because you don't have any structure. It's
Right.
all in your head. When I started off, I took courses and seminars and went to lots of writers' conferences. And there are many techniques. There are, the story arcs,
Right.
quite famous, scene cards, and others. And I tried all those things. And my early books, that's what I would meticulously do. My stories are, I think, a little more difficult because Tom Clancy was one of the people I followed a lot. And he made an art form of these multiple teams of people doing things all in the same storyline. So you have to keep track of what this group is doing and that group is doing, the other group is doing. So keeping this all together, I had scene cards and I had story arcs. And as I went to conferences, people would give me ideas. I'd try different things. And probably the first 2, 3 books, maybe more than that, were meticulously designed that way. Well, after you do it for a while, you kind of pick up the rhythm and you start to know your characters.
It's more intuitive.
It is more intuitive, and in fact, the tools get in your way. Okay.
Sure.
I think that you can probably hack out novels real fast. You just take something and bam, 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 and you have blood on every 3rd page or something.
Right.
And you have a formula. That's not what I do. Each of my stories is different. And I find that as I write them, everybody who touches it, and I don't think you can write at a professional level today without good critical readers. I've been a judge for some contests, and if the structure isn't right, if the grammar isn't right, if the words are awkward, the book isn't going to make it. It could be a good story. So I have a lot of people who will put eyes on it and give me their thoughts. And the interesting thing for me is everybody who touches it, I have a group I trust quite a bit. And most of them don't want to be named. Some of them are, doing other things. But every time they touch it, they will find something to improve, and they find different things. They have different viewpoints. I have one of my critical readers is a world expert on the Celts. Well, one of my characters in a former life was a Celtic princess. That's Josie in the Ravens novel. Okay, and so that really helped. Oh wow, that's pretty interesting. So this book, a thriller, was the first thriller to ever win a national award in paranormal.
I saw that. Yeah.
And so you have to have, and just lots of people help you. So I think you have to start off learning the craft, making mistakes, grinding through, using what tools you can find, and taking advice. And it becomes an art after you've done it for a while. The characters kind of take over. When are you going to have your book done? The one I'm working on now is quite late because the research was difficult. It also turns out it's a difficult book to write because of things that haven't quite happened yet. This one is, you'll see it. The one that hasn't come out yet, the working title for it, it's in the Ravens series. It's book number 4. And the working title we have, which I think is going to stick, is Broken Oath, a Raven novel. Okay. And it's set along the invasion route up from Venezuela into the U.S. Venezuela is kind of the new Syria. Syria was where everything started, and it swept into Western Europe. And so I know people who are actually working on these kind of things, and the situation's still evolving. It was amusing to me that they just came out with the Ryan TV thing that Amazon does.
Right.
They had to delay that 3 times because things were, I don't know why, but my view is because I was trying to look at the same stuff. And this has to settle down a little bit for me to make sense of it. But it just came out like a week or so ago. And it's okay. So the research, that's how I write, and I wish I had a formula where I could say, if you do it this way, it's probably different for different styles of books.
I think so. We're out of time. We didn't get nearly far enough, so I'm going to ask you a favor. Can you come back and we'll try it again?
I'd love to. I'd be honored.
That's so great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the book. Thank you for the anecdotes about the pen and so on. We didn't get to as much of the writing as I'd hoped, but we'll get there.
I'd love to.
We'll do it again. All right, folks, another fast half hour. Thanks for watching. I'm Stephen W. Long. Visit me at stephenwlong.com. John?
And let me say, yes,
Yeah.
John Trudel, Trudel with one L. The website is just my name, www.johntrudel.com. The first chapters of all my novels are up there for free with reviews and interviews. And I have a blog, same thing, blog.johntrudel.com. Take a look at them, and I have a newsletter you can sign up for as well. Just my name, johntrudel.com.
Easy. Great. A lot of fun. Thanks. Thank you, and thanks to everybody for watching. And we'll see you next time on The Writing Life.
Thanks.
What do you think? We done?
I don't know. You guys want to do one
Yeah,
just
I
with
think
yourself
as
without
long
me
as
doing
they
the
think we're
markers?
done, if
No,
they got
no.
enough, they got enough.
They got enough? Probably. Okay, sounds good.
Let's go lunch.
Oh.
I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could just bite too.